Alright guys, next we're going to keep exploring JavaScript, the Junior Dash folder. And what we're going to do is we're going to build the templates for the items to list out. We need to do this in JavaScript because we're going to be doing a lot of dynamic mambo jumbo. So in here, I like to keep it clean. Let's make a new folder and call it dashboard because this will be a child of the dashboard. And we'll make a new JavaScript file and call it template. And I spelled that wrong. Template. And just like the dashboard, we could just copy all this code and paste it into the template and pretty much get everything deleted and rename it to template. Okay, we'll say template created. So what are some of the templates we need? We're going to need a to-do template. So I'll say var. Actually, I want to say this because I want it publicly accessible. Dot to do equals function. Okay. Now notice that I just called it to do. The reason is it's in the template class, so we're going to reference it like template dot to do. So it's not a big deal to be super picky here. Looks like I'm putting these on the same line. Stay consistent. And let's start with var output equals nothing. And we'll say output plus equals and then return output. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to pass in an object inside of here. And it's going to render a row one by one. And I'll give you an example. So for this, I'm going to start out with a div, I believe. We'll just try that, div. And the closing div. And let's throw in a span. Right now this isn't anything really superficial. Now the object is going to need a, so this is a to-do list, it's going to need content. And inside this little guy here, we're going to want to give him some kind of reference. So I'll say ID equals and plus plus obj dot to do ID. Okay, and this looks a little crazy, don't it? So slow down with me if you need to, and just make sure you have dashboard template and it's in a folder. And then we got to make sure we include this file in the views. Home, whoops, dashboard, inc, header, and include it here. And you want to include it before the dashboard because we're going to call it from the dashboard. So dashboard slash template.js. Okay. So it's kind of like reverse order of the children to the parent. And I'll close him out. And inside of dashboard, in the construct, I want to have templates available. The best way to do that, I think, is if I just give it a big old fat variable. I'll say template equals new template. Okay, so let me try template dot. There should be a to-do in here. Let's see, template.js. It might not be referencing the right code in the IDE, so to do. And I'll pass in an object. And remember, we have a to do ID and content. So to do ID, I'll just say 1, and content equals this is life. Okay. And I'll console.log it. Okay. Let me just do this, console log, just so you can see what's happening. Okay, so that's all I'm doing, and I want to see what happens when I do this. So I'll refresh, and you see how it rendered this? It put my ID in here, and it put this is life in there. So what we're going to do is say we have 20 items, we would do an AJAX call, and it would populate these into the DOM here. Okay, so that's just a console log for a test. Let's make one for a note. I could pretty much duplicate this. I'll say note, and this would be note ID, and then it has a title as well. And for now, I believe we can leave this template alone. We'll polish it up later and put actual Twitter Bootstrap based DOM elements in it. So you see how we have a separate template. It's only dedicated to templates. Dashboard is basically the core of the application. Next, let's create an event handler. So rather than have all this stuff filled with templates and events, we're separating our logic. So I'll make a new file and I'll call it event, and I'll just copy the template file. Whoops. And call this event and event. And I could just delete some of those guys. And what we want to do is create a couple listeners. So let's take a look. Inside of here, I'm going to inspect with Control-Shift-C and click. And here is one called Create To Do, and we also know the other one is Note To Do. So I'll say this, or do I want it to be private? Let's see. I believe I want it to be var, because I only want it accessible within this class. So I'll say var, what was the name of that? Create to do equals function, and we'll say create to do dot submit function event, and we'll say return false. And let's just console log for our debug's sake. Create to do was clicked. And let's also do one for create note. Like so. And we need, see, these aren't going to do anything yet, so I'll say create to do, create note. That initializes these methods. And in the dashboard, we need to instantiate event. So event equals new event. So when the event's instantiated, what happens is this class loads, the construct is already hit, and then it calls these guys, and these just listen for the events. So it's basically just an event class that's going to do stuff. And let's make sure we remember to include the event in the dashboard include header. So event, and I'm going to refresh, make sure things look okay. Event created, create to do clicked, create note clicked. That's exactly what we want, you guys. So let's go back to the template, and not the template, sorry, the dashboard. There's load to do, load note. We can get rid of create note, create to do. The updates and deletes will go in the event. So we could cut all this out. We're kind of refactoring as we go. And in the event, let's just paste that in there. Okay. And create note, create to do. So update and delete. So just to save us time, we'll say update to do, update note, delete to do, delete note. This may seem a little redundant, but in the long run, once you build a big JavaScript application, you really want to have some organization rather than one really long file. That's my take on it anyways. And again, I'll refresh to make sure everything feels like it's behaving nicely. So we now have a basic structure for this. I believe that's all we'll need for our structure. Briefly, I think we'll also create a result class. So I'll make another JavaScript file called result, and I'll just copy the event, paste it in the result, pretty much delete everything except for the construct. We'll say result created and result. So I know this was a lot to follow at once, so I'm going to end this section and include these files up to date so that you have exactly what I have. And let's just say this dot success equals function. Okay, and we'll just duplicate that guy up there, and we'll say error. And this is going to be a custom handler for the result. When they create something or whatever they do, we want to do that. In the header view, I'm also going to create result at the very top. So when an event happens, I want results to be feasible in here. So I'll say result equals new result. And inside of the template, we're not going to need it, and we'll need a result if something goes wrong when some stuff loads. Let's tab these over a little evenly. There we go, that looks nice. And let's check the event. That will need a result. Let me load this above these methods, because if this method gets called before this is instantiated, it's going to be a problem. And the result class is just very simple right now. Okay, and let's close out this video, and please download the source, because you might have a couple things off. Maybe I do, but at least we'll be on the same page.